1, go.
Welcome back to our Daniel discussions. We're just really excited to have you guys with us tonight. Tonight we're going to be going over Daniel 3, and we are super psyched. We have James and Jared. We have Angie, or Angela, and Rafael. And we are so excited to have this discussion with you guys. So let's get started with the word of prayer. Dearly Father God, I just want to thank you so much that we have this opportunity to be able to dive into your word, and I pray that you would just continue to give us guidance, help this session to go well, and help us to be able to get a lot out of your word. In Jesus' name we pray, amen. Okay, so let's start reading. Nebuchadnezzar the king made an image of gold whose height was 60 cubits and width 6 cubits. He set it up in the plain of Dura in the province of Babylon. And King Nebuchadnezzar sent word to gather together the satraps, the administrators, the governors, the counselors, the treasurers, the judges, the magistrates, and all the officials of the provinces to come to the dedication of the image which King Nebuchadnezzar had set up. So the satraps, the administrators, the governors, the counselors, the treasurers, the judges, the magistrates, and all the officials of the provinces gathered together for the dedication of the image that King Nebuchadnezzar had set up. And they stood before the image that King Nebuchadnezzar had set up.
Yeah. Oh, Rafael. Well, I just think it's really interesting that the chapter before, Nebuchadnezzar had his dream about the big statue and the head was gold and that represented Babylon and him. But now he decided to, we don't know how long after this is exactly, but it was some time after, and he decided, well, now I'm going to make a whole statue out of gold and like kind of symbolizing that, no, I'm going to decide my fate. I want my kingdom to be forever. Yeah. And even though he had this amazing experience before, he saw that the King of the Most High was really the living God. Now he's just going back to that, showing that that is not enough. Only having the theoretical information is not enough to have your relationship with God. Yeah,
so like we see in the previous chapter, he had an intellectual experience, and I've seen, that was in the third year of Nebuchadnezzar's reign. This one, so usually a lot of theologians think that this might be in his 18th year of his reign. We're not really sure because the Bible doesn't say, but obviously, like you were saying, just having that intellectual experience wasn't enough for him to be fully converted. Yeah.
He's definitely trying to make a statement here.
Yeah.
And the fact that very clearly, maybe about 10, 15 years prior or more, he had been like, all glory goes to the God of Daniel. And then it's like time goes on and he's like, I don't like this. Let's change this. And especially if you think about it, it's a very public dream, I'm sure, to a degree. I'm sure word spread because so many were involved in the fact that, the death penalty was being sent forth. And so therefore, it's definitely a point that he's trying to publicly make. And the fact that they repeat the list twice, and it's clearly everyone who's anyone of authority and rank is showing up to see what this statue is about.
Yeah. Hey, verse 4. Then a herald cried aloud, "To you it is commanded, O peoples, nations, and languages, that at the time you hear the sound of the horn, flute, harp, lyre, and psaltery, in symphony with all kinds of music, you shall fall down and worship the gold image that King Nebuchadnezzar set up. And whoever does not fall down and worship shall be cast immediately into the midst of a burning fiery furnace." So at that time, when all the people heard the sound of the horn, flute, harp, and lyre, in symphony with all kinds of music, all the people, nations, and languages fell down and worshipped the gold image which King Nebuchadnezzar had set up.
I mean, it's really interesting to note how he makes a notice of both all the people twice, and then he lists all the music twice. And we're going to see he does it even again, whoever wrote this. And it's really interesting because it really makes a statement that the leaders are really important people and they really have this responsibility. And music is also an essential key of worship. People usually go, it doesn't really matter like what kind of music you play at church and stuff. But this kind of shows that music brings you into a place of worship. It brings you into a period of worship, and it also affects how you worship, and it really is what you worship, kind of. Yeah. It's a big part of the music. Music's used all throughout the Bible, and this is just another example of music that's used for the wrong reason.
It's like music can bring you to worship, but then what is it that is bringing you to worship exactly?
Yeah. I think it's really interesting because they mentioned the group of people that were there 2 times. That's really pivotal. And then in verse 7, they say like, all kinds of all the people, nations, and languages fell down, meaning that those people over there represented the whole world. Then that was cool.
Another thing that I've seen people say, oh, just by bowing down to this, it's just paying respect, right? But one big point that I've seen is that this whole process was basically, if you're bowing down to it, you're saying the gods of Babylon are stronger than every other god. And so it wasn't possible, as we're going to see, for people to bow down and just have it be a form of respect. Like, it was worship. Let's move on. Verse 8. Therefore at that time certain Chaldeans came forward and accused the Jews. They spoke and said to King Nebuchadnezzar, O king, live forever. You, O king, have made a decree that everyone who hears the sound of the horn, flute, harp, lyre, and psaltery, and symphony with all kinds of music shall fall down and worship the gold image. Whoever does not fall down and worship shall be cast in the midst of a burning fiery furnace. There are certain Jews whom you have set over the affairs of the provinces of Babylon, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. These men, O king, have not paid due regard to you. They do not serve your gods or worship the gold image which you have set up.
I think it's really funny how in the chapter before, Daniel and his friend, they kind of saved those people, the Chaldeans, from being killed by the king, and now they are backstabbing them or throwing them under the bus again. I just think it's funny that even if you try to help people, it doesn't mean that they will help you forever. Like, we don't become friends with people high up just to have a good life. We become friends and love people high up just because God loves them.
And they're also saying, they're putting the blame on Nebuchadnezzar. They're saying, you're the one that set these people up. You set them up, and they're not doing what you said. And they're like kind of making a joke out of him. And you see he like gets really furious the next verse after. And it's a lot of that's because they're saying the blame's on you as well.
Let's keep going. Then King Nebuchadnezzar, in rage and fury, gave the command to bring Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. So they brought these men before the king. Nebuchadnezzar spoke, saying to them, Is it true, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, that you do not serve my gods or worship the gold image which I set up? Now if you are ready at the time you hear the sound of the horn, flute, harp, lyre, and psaltery, and symphony with all kinds of music, and you fall down and worship the image which I have made, good. But if you do not worship, you shall be cast immediately into the midst of a burning fiery furnace. And who is the God who will deliver you from my hands?
It's really funny because he knows what kind of God it is. He had experienced the chapter before, maybe it was 15 years, but he still knew it, and he knew about Daniel, because Daniel was at the gate with Nebuchadnezzar. So he kind of know what God is was, but he was still challenging, like how could your God be stronger than my God?
Yeah, and I think it's interesting how there's a lot of, you can see that Nebuchadnezzar is motivated by fear. Like this whole thing, he knew that his kingdom was going to come to an end because of the previous chapter, but yet he does this whole image made out of gold. He's basically trying to fight back against that, and he's afraid of his kingdom ending. And he's also you can see he's kind of baffled by these people who seemingly don't have any fear for what he's telling them to do. And so another thing that I think stands out too is that he's giving them a second chance. Like before he was pretty adamant on, oh yeah, if you don't do it, into the fire you go, But I think it says something that he really did care about these guys, because he's willing to give them a second chance even though they had basically publicly humiliated him for this first time. So.
And I think a big reason is because they were 10 times smarter. And he could kind of see, and they were like Daniel's friends, and he knew that there was something special about these 4 people, and he kind of wanted to give them another chance. Like, you're smart, you're like giving a lot to my palace and everything. But they didn't bow down.
Let's move on. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego answered and said to the king, O Nebuchadnezzar, we have no need to answer you in this matter. If that is the case, our God whom we serve is able to deliver us from the burning fiery furnace, and he will deliver us from your hand, O king. But if not, let it be known to you, O king, that we do not serve your gods, nor will we worship the gold image which you have set up.
I just really like, it's like one of my favourite things is how they just say, God will deliver us, but if not, we're still not going to save you. Doesn't matter, even if God doesn't save my life, still not turning my back on him. And it's really powerful for me, because when I first became a Christian, I was like, oh, well, what if God doesn't do this for me? What if God doesn't do that for me? And then you've got these people that say, even if not, we're still going to do it. And it reminds me of that verse in James 1, 2 and 3 where it says, count it all joy when you fall into various trials because the testing of your faith produces patience.
Yeah.
Yeah, another point off that is the fact that I think we all need to live in that mindset that this is not our home. That if we really believe that this was only a passing through, then death is not the end of the story. It's just a page compared to eternity, you know? And so if you think about that context, it's like, it's all right. I know that God has a bigger picture going on and God has another reason. And I think that applies to us today because often we have fires in life, we have trials, and we ask God why, and often He can't give us the why. But if we choose, He can always make a reason out of the fire. And so I think that's the mindset Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego said, you know what, we trust God. We've served Him long enough. He's proved to be faithful up to this point. If He doesn't save us, then He sees a bigger picture that we don't see. And if I think if we live that way as Christians, how different would we face life constantly if we had that mindset? Like, no, there's a bigger picture that I can't see. That's why I'm being denied this money or being denied. You fill in the blank, whatever your dream is, the house, the spouse, the car, the whatever. Well, there's a bigger picture. And at some point, we trust Him fully, or why stand at all, you know?
Yeah. And I think another point that I draw from this is that they're very respectful in all this. Like, they were staying true to their convictions, but you know, they're saying, oh Nebuchadnezzar, oh king, oh king. They're giving him respect. They're not disrespecting his position as king, but they're saying that there's something above this position, and that's our God. And so I think that, you know, there's a way to be true to your convictions while still being respectful to other people.
Yeah, and that's another point too, is the way that they were not going to argue is also similar to many other martyrs. There's a point where you don't need to. I've stated this is what I believe, and at this point we're just arguing for the sake of arguing. You know what I stand for, and I respect you. You need to be the king, and so therefore you need to follow through what you said in order to keep the respect. So it's okay. You be king, and we'll see what the fate will be.
Awesome. Verse 19. Then Nebuchadnezzar was full of fury, and the expression on his face changed towards Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. He spoke and commanded that they heat the furnace 7 times more than it was usually heated. And he commanded certain mighty men of valor who were in his army to bind Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego and cast them into the burning fiery furnace. And these men were bound in their coats, their trousers, their turbans, and their other garments, and were cast into the midst of the burning fiery furnace. Therefore, because of the king's command was urgent, and the furnace exceedingly hot, the flame of the fire killed those men who took up Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. And these 3 men, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, fell down bound into the midst of the burning fiery furnace.
You know, Nebuchadnezzar did not have that fiery furnace heated up 7 times hotter to kill them. It didn't need to be. That wasn't the point. The point was he knew there were gods, and he was trying to make sure that there was no interference. Because in his brain, gods could be stopped and controlled with different things. He's like, let me just make sure there's no way that there's going to be tomfoolery. I want to make sure this is foolproof, because I do remember that there could be a god or gods, so let's just make sure. Let's heat it up.
Yeah. And then I think also the point that the expression on his face changed towards Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, that just goes to show that before he really did, like he honestly did want them to kind of, you know, change their course and pay respect to this idol that he had made. But all of a sudden, because they decided not to, like he really, like that just kind of sends him off the rails.
I think he was used to, like when he threatened people to death, or especially like firing furnace, that's not nice that way to die. Like when he was threatening that way, people will often listen to him.
Yeah.
And he maybe was kind of shocked, like why are you guys afraid of this?
Yeah.
And so he just got mad.
Yeah. Awesome. So moving on. Then King Nebuchadnezzar was astonished, and he rose in haste and spoke, saying to his counselors, "Did we not cast 3 men bound into the midst of the fire?" They answered and said to the king, "True, O king." "Look," he answered, "I see 4 men loose, walking in the midst of the fire, and they are not hurt. And the form of the 4th is like the Son of God."
That's funny, because... Oh, did you want to take this?
Oh, no, you can take it.
Okay, well, I think it's really funny because you've got these people and they're obviously watching. It would have been a spectacle. They would have... I don't know how often they see it. I wasn't there. If you get a time travel machine, tell me. They don't exist, but...
Or
who knows? But it's really funny because he says to them, they've seen his fury, like his servants, and he says, aren't there 3 in there? And they're like, yeah, there's 3, there's 2. when he's asking, because he can see 4. And so he's like, I see 4. It's like, what's going on?
This just shows how afraid they were of the king. Like, because he was angry. Maybe if they said something against him, he will also throw them in. So there's a lot of fear here.
I think it's a beautiful point that he recognizes that the Son of God. And I think that you have to stop and wonder, why and how on earth could King Nebuchadnezzar recognize that it was the Son of God? Well, the only way that could be possible was if Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego had somehow shown what that could have looked like in real life. You know, and the fact that, and their character and the way that they interacted with people and their peace and their courage, what they carried with them resembled the Son of God, where he could instantly recognize, I know who that is. And I think that is such a wake-up call to all of us. You know, when people walk with us, when people spend time with us, do they recognize in us the Son of God? Because we have that ability to carry on the Son of God. So are we? Where if somebody saw, they'd be like, oh yeah, I know them.
And I think it's crazy, like, Nebuchadnezzar's not near the furnace because obviously it'd be way too hot. So he sees this person walking around and he immediately recognizes that it's the Son of God. Like, just the way that they were witnessing in their everyday lives was so clearly after God that he was able to recognize it immediately, even from a distance. So it's crazy. Moving on. Then Nebuchadnezzar went near the mouth of the burning fiery furnace and spoke, saying, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, servants of the Most High God, come out and come here. Then Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego came from the midst of the fire. And the satraps, administrators, governors, and the king's counselors gathered together, and they saw these men on whose bodies the fire had no power. The hair of their head was not singed, nor were their garments affected, and the smell of fire was not on them. Nebuchadnezzar spoke, saying, Blessed to the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who sent his angel and has delivered his servants who trusted in him, and they have frustrated the king's word and yielded their bodies, that they should not serve nor worship any god except their own. Therefore I make a decree that any people, nation, or language who speaks anything amiss against the God of Shadrach, Meshach, or Abednego shall be cut in pieces, and their houses shall be made an ash heap, because there is no other God who can deliver like this. Then the king promoted Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego in the province of Babylon.
A really cool thing is that in the fiery furnace, it's often like when you go through trials or like life, it's just like a fiery furnace sometimes, and it's so tough. But when you go through it, you can see that they went in there, and like the only thing that burned up was their ropes that tied them together. They could walk freely, and like going through the fiery furnace today, like in the end, the only thing that will be burned up is not our character. It was the sin in us that will be burned up. We'll be free. That's the thing that will, like, we'll be free from sin when we go through trials, and I think that's pretty awesome.
And I think that, you know, the smell of fire was not on them. Like, you go to a campfire for, I don't know, like 30 minutes, and all your clothes smell like smoke. And these guys are inside the fire, and then they didn't have any smell of smoke on them. And I think, you know, it's just, like you're saying, the things in our lives that get burned away aren't ourselves, but it's really the things that tie us to this world, or that tie us to, you know, in sin, and just the things that actually do control us. And so that's a really good point.
I just noticed this, and I don't know, was Nebuchadnezzar still angry? Because he goes, if anyone speaks anything amiss of the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, they shall be cut in pieces, and the houses shall be made an ash heap. It's like he still had this wrath inside him, like he still wanted to fulfill something deep, right?
Well, it's not like that's... Oh, go ahead.
And that guy just goes to show like how much of like a violent person he still kind of was. Even though he's seen the acts of God, he still wants to make threats, and that's all it seems he wants to do in this whole chapter.
Well, it's the same way he ends chapter 2 as well. He's like, all right, this is truly the king, the God of all gods, and everybody should worship him. You know, it's like he always makes these super drastic swings, like, everybody worship me. Everybody worship the God of Daniel. Now everybody worship the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego.
I think, you know, that just goes to show that it's not really the big gestures you make, but really what happens inside that not everybody can see. And I think we're starting to see hints of this where he says in verse 28, says, "Blessed be the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who sent his angel and delivered his servants who trusted in him, and they have frustrated the king's word." Like he's praising God for frustrating his own word and his own command. And I think that we're gonna see this later on, but it just really goes to show that Nebuchadnezzar is having his heart worked on little by little. Like later on, like he says, "Oh, whoever doesn't worship, their houses are gonna be an ash heap." So he's not completely converted yet, but he's making steps towards what God is trying to help him in his life.
I think a really cool thing is that you can see in verse 27 that all the satraps, administrator, governors, and the counselor, they gathered together then. And those three friends, when they were like not bowing down, they didn't. They showed what they believed, but they didn't kind of prove their faith or anything. They didn't show it that much then, and they didn't when they was talking to the king either. But it was when they went into the furnace and when Jesus was walking with them, that they could minister to people, that people could see this is real what they're doing right now because they're walking with Jesus.
Yeah. It was like they didn't have to justify themselves then, like they were justified by the outcome of what happened.
I think it's interesting to note, where's Daniel? Where is Daniel? He's definitely one of the high officials. Why isn't he there? And I think that there could be many speculations, but one could be the fact that Nebuchadnezzar, there's no way you can have a dream like that and not remember it, so of course he's remembering this dream. And I think that one of the speculations could be quite positive, that Daniel was sent away to work on some mission that was very convenient at that time, because he knew two things. One, Daniel might try to give him some words of wisdom about this great idea, or two, he had the risk that Daniel would stand up. And if Daniel stood up, then he would look like an incompetent leader who had appointed somebody who was not respectful. And so he was like, oh, I don't want to take that risk. And then Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego stand up. And I think it's really awesome, because if you think about it, Daniel gets so much attention when these three made the same extreme sacrifices that Daniel had to. So in a way, God's showing us that in everyone's time, in everyone's sphere, you're going to get your moment to shine for him. It's just going to be in different ways.
I think to wrap it up, just any last thoughts that you guys have?
It just shows how, it's the little acts that you do in your everyday life that really build who you are. Yeah. We see that again and again throughout the whole book. It's always, there's steps before, if they in chapter 1, if they got told, bow down straight away or you'd be thrown in the fiery furnace, would they have had the same faith to not bow down? I'm not sure. We can't say, but I definitely think the fact that they stood up for those little trials definitely helped build their faith along the way.
Yeah. I think another thing too is just making your point applicable for our everyday lives. Every single thing we do, the things we consume, the things we buy, the things we pay attention to, every single thing is basically a vote, or you're bowing down in a sense to one thing or another. And so I think it's really good to think about in our everyday lives, what are we actually bowing down to? What are we voting for through our everyday actions?
What I think is really cool is that this is the second step in Nebuchadnezzar's conversion story, and the first step is intellectual experience, you see God really exists and he's powerful, and the second step that he has right here to see it in other people, and that's a step that many people don't think about, that you have to see it in other people, because Nebuchadnezzar saw that they had no fear, Nebuchadnezzar saw that they had a faith, and then in the next chapter we'll see the conversion story wrap up, so that will be exciting.
I want to throw another point out there. I know you said one more, but these men got promoted even more, and for me that something pops up in my mind is don't go against your doctrinal beliefs, and this is for the young people as well, is don't go against your doctrinal beliefs to fit in so that maybe you'll be more successful, because these men were no, we're sticking to our beliefs, and they got promoted after because things turned out so well for them. Had they bowed down, probably would have never happened, because they weren't from that area. the only reason they were probably in that position from before was because of the dream last time. So the only reason they've ever been able to get promoted is because they stood up for God. And I think that's like a thing. I think that goes to show that we should stand up for God in everything that we do, even if it seems like it's going to make life harder. It could actually make life way easier.
Yeah, and to lead off that point too, I think that the beauty of this story is where it's at. I mean, it's in Daniel, the book of mysteries, the book that's sealed and shut up for the time at the end. It's full of weird beasts and crazy, scary looking things, and yet there's this story that so many know, a children's story in so many ways, tucked in the middle, of courage, of strength, of fortitude to say, I'm going to stick through it no matter what. And I think it's an incredible promise to us in a book talking about end time prophecy, in a book pointing, hey, tribulation is coming your way, the end of the world is coming. Nobody likes those words, but yet it's like, look, this is a story to remind you that Jesus always was, is, and will be by our side. Because here Jesus shows up. He shows up. And if he shows up then, he's going to show up in the future. He's going to show up now. He's longing to show up. It's just, when are we going to personally decide in our hearts, Lord, it doesn't matter what's going on. It doesn't matter if everyone likes me. It doesn't matter if everyone sees things the way I see. It doesn't matter. What matters is that you matter to me. And based on that, Lord, the world can do whatever it wants because I know that I'm going to serve you. And I think that's the call we have to ask ourselves. Are we truly serving him, or does it just feel good to be in the Christian world? Does it feel good to go to church or put yourselves in different aspects? Or am I serving God because I know that I believe he is God?
That's a good point to end on. Yep. Well, just want to thank you so much for joining us for our discussion of Daniel 3. Come back and we'll be discussing Daniel 4, which is going to be awesome. So yeah, just stay tuned. We love you guys. See you next time. Bye.
Cheers.